Welcome to Fjook Enterprises YouTube channel. Today I'm here with Molly and we are talking about ODSP. So let's start off. What is ODSP?
ODSP is the short form for Ontarians with Disabilities Support Program. Basically, it provides financial support, some health benefits, some drug coverage for certain persons with disabilities within Ontario who do not have financial savings due to their disability and are unable to make more income than their cutoff. It's a really low cutoff. It's under the poverty line. So if you're disabled with specific stuff that meets their criteria and are already under the poverty line and don't have any savings, then you're allowed on disability.
When you say disability, do you mean mental or physical disabilities?
All disabilities are eligible for consideration, provided they are considered debilitating in a way that prevents the ability to participate in enough paid work to make a living income. It includes physical disabilities, developmental disabilities, and mental illness.
Do invisible disabilities exist?
Yeah, so the term invisible disabilities simply means ones that aren't readily visible to the casual observer. So there's tons of disabilities that fit in that category. Often there's even ones that are physical but aren't obvious to those who aren't familiar with the person experiencing the disability. Basically, anything that doesn't have a physical marker. Even I know some people who use a wheelchair but can walk sometimes or can walk for short periods of time could consider their disability invisible, because a lot of people will assume that they're faking when they do use a wheelchair, because there's some periods of time where they don't need it.
Has anyone ever accused you of faking your disability?
Oh, quite often. There's a lot of people that typically when I'm being outspoken on any particular topic, so it's not so much that they know me or care, they're just more upset with me and they go after me for being a person with disabilities, or people that I'm in conflict with. Will often accuse me of trying to gain advantage or work the system.
I've heard it's a struggle to get on ODSP. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. Due to funding cuts over the last several years, it's getting more and more restrictions on gaining access to support, which is brutal. I was told several times that people are purposely denied their application and their first several appeals to weed out casual requests. To me, this is extremely ableist, as the most disabled are the least able to cope with the demands of the appeal process. It was 2-3 years of dealing with appeals and lawyers and paperwork, etc., before I finally was approved. There are some people who get approved easily, but for the most part, it's extremely challenging. And a lot of people will end up homeless or underhoused while they wait to get the support they need.
I've also heard that it's not enough money to live on. Is that accurate?
Um yeah, so there's like the answer is kind of a double no, in that there's not enough money in the government budget for disabled people, and then they also don't distribute enough to the individuals on disability. For an example, for my family, myself, my child, and my service animal, they give us $1,500 a month. Most two-bedroom apartments where I live start at $1,500 plus utilities. So just getting an appropriate two-bedroom apartment for my child and I would be above or on par with the total amount of disability payments. So there's a massive discrepancy between cost of living and support provided. Most people with disabilities have to get creative with friends or group housing. It's also messy because if you live with a direct family member, ODSP will often cut you off because you live with family and therefore they consider you not needing funding. There's also alternative programs like supportive housing, but that has about a 5-year wait list unless you are actively homeless or in an emergency shelter. For me, I'm really lucky that I received child support from my child's father as well as the Canadian Child Benefit because those aren't subtracted from ODSP. My spousal support from my ex is counted at 100%. So there's no, I, I get nothing extra for having spousal support. And basically, my kid and I live in a cute little studio and we make it work. So there's no bedrooms. It's all one room aside from the bathroom. And that's all we can afford right now.
It sounds like it would be difficult to live a life and not be a homebody on this style of budget constraints. Is that accurate?
You really have to adapt, which obviously disabled people already have less ability to do that. Um, there's the challenges of standard social affairs that cost money, transportation costs money. Often easier modes of transportation are not available. Like where I live, they don't have a lot of accessible taxis or other vehicle services. They have a disability transportation system, but it requires a lengthy application process as well. Plus, you have to book things ahead of time in order to get access to it. I personally have significant challenges with busing because of my disability and driving services like Uber. While they're technically required not to discriminate, they'll often refuse access because I have a service animal. It's illegal, but they don't understand that necessarily. And standing in the cold for 30, 45 minutes, having people leave me on the side of the road because they refuse access, even though legally I'm entitled to access, is extremely exhausting. I haven't seen my grandparents in years because I don't have a way of traveling 5 hours drive. There's a lot of great activities that are low cost, but it's greatly limiting for someone on a tight budget to only be able to participate in low cost or free activities. And again, getting there can also be a problem. So it can be very socially isolating. You have to be creative, and it's hard to do that. In my case, I've made some choices like I could blow my entire disability check on a 2-bedroom apartment so my child and I could each have our own room. Instead, we have a small studio, which is, a bit cramped, but we make it work. On the flip side, that allows me to have a little bit of extra money to take him swimming or to put him in swimming lessons or to go out for dinner every now and then. So because we've chosen to live in a very small physical space, it gives us a little bit extra space in our budget for other things. But my building isn't accessible either. Like, it's all stairs. So for someone that has a physical disability, they wouldn't even be able to access this building.
Hearing about the ODSP and age in other provinces, disability and healthcare aid programs, I really think we need a universal basic income to alleviate a lot of these issues.
You mentioned UBI because there's also other advantages that they've looked at. For example, women in domestic violence situations often will have their income controlled. So if there was UBI, it would be much easier for them to leave and move to a place of safety because they wouldn't be losing financial stability to the same extent by leaving their abuser. I know the federal government is looking at giving, like, topping up the disability payments, but I know a lot of the provinces are trying to then cut back. So basically, they're like, if the government's going to pay you $500 a month. Instead of paying you $1,500 a month from the province, we'll just pay you $1,000 a month. So it'll save us money. So there's problems because disabled people are often the bottom rung in society, which is really hard and frustrating because a lot of us could work if we could find accommodation and stuff, but the program burns you for working. And it's hard enough to get on and do all the paperwork and all of the other processes that are required to stay on it. It can become a full-time job just taking care of your basic needs and chasing down social workers and other stuff you need to do just to get by.
Does one need money to be able to have fun with friends?
Yeah, but it certainly makes it easier to access things like transportation to the place you're meeting at. I tend to rely on picnics, walks, and socializing at home since those activities are not financially strenuous. But I do miss being able to just go out and grab a hot drink without having to stress over the expense and go, okay, have I used up my budget for going out this month because I only have a very small amount allotted to it. So I have to keep an eye on those sorts of things, which is, it's stressful. It adds an extra stressor to life that I would prefer not to have. But I think I can still have good relationships with my friends. It's just I have to adapt and I do miss out on a lot of things still.
As you're aware from listening and being on interviews with me, my final question is always the same. Do you have anything or anyone you would like to shout out at this time?
I mean, I could shout out my blog this time instead of my other one. So my other one I shared last time was my world for the Pathfinder campaign I run. I also have a blog. It's ellameadows.wordpress. I can't talk today. ellameadows.wordpress.com. So I have poetry there, but I also have like little bits and pieces of my story. So if people are curious about my journey from being a cum laude Bachelor of Science RN to where I am today in a little studio on disability. I do have bits and pieces of my story on my blog if people are curious and want to know more about me.
Thank you for everyone who made it this far. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay sane out there.